Namaskar and welcome to Sunset Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of fake news and how to tackle fake news. In fact, terming lack of patience and tolerance biggest challenges of our age, Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, has said that truth is a victim in an age of false news. Now, speaking at a conference organized by the American Bar Association, CJI Chandrachud said a danger that society faces is that technology and its repercussions are flowing out of control. He also spoke about the use of technology by the judiciary and issues confronting the judicial profession. In September 2021, also, the Supreme Court had expressed grave concern over web portals and YouTube channels for spreading false news in the absence of a regulatory mechanism. Now, over the years, the government has put in place statutory and institutional mechanisms to combat fake news. For print media, Press Council of India has framed norms of journalistic conduct under the Press Council Act 1978, and all TV channels are required to adhere to the program code under the Cable Television Networks Regulation Act 1995. Now, for digital news platforms or publishers, the government has notified the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021 under the IT Act 2000. A fact-check unit has also been set up under Press Information Bureau, that is PIB, under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. So today we will analyze various aspects of this issue, try and understand how is fake news spreading and what is being done, what more needs to be done to tackle this particular challenge. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with the two senior journalists who we have in our studio today, Mr. Sanjay Singh and Mr. K.V. Prasad. Both of them are here with us. Welcome, both of you gentlemen, to our studios. Khushbu Jain is also joining us, an advocate from the Supreme Court, keeps a close watch on the related aspects of this issue. Khushbu, welcome to you as well. I'll start with you, Sanjay ji, and let's first try and understand how big a challenge or a threat is the menace of fake news in today's age and world.
Vishal, what CJI has said has truth in it. There are occasions when fake news is actually causing serious damage to fabric of society, to our economy and to social order. Law and order, of course, is another challenge when fake news, like you get some religious structure is under attack and some news which can potentially spread riot. What CJI was referring to, he was essentially talking about the judgments delivered by the Supreme Court and the way certain sections of people reacting, so to say, quote unquote, the trolls. There are two sides of it. If you ask me, there are two sides of it. A, fake news is a real problem for us and for rest of the world. Because everybody has a mobile phone is his or her hand, and therefore every single person is, in today's parlance, is a reporter. And has kind of swiftness. If you fire something right or wrong, it reaches to hundreds and thousands of people. But then there are situations when few things go wrong and they are intentionally posted wrong informations and fake news. But there are also situations where CJI was referring about the people trolling to not just the judgment but also about the judges. Now, if you look at it from other side, this is a great empowerment tool in hands of common people. What was happening, or prior to advent of social media, this repository of knowledge was limited to few individuals, few elites in society, in whatever walk of life, but they were limited elites, and communication was one way, through some newspapers, through some television channels, and through whatever other platform. Now every individual has freedom to say, if what I am saying now, certain other people may judge and may comment whether I'm speaking it right or wrong. CJ was saying, if you don't agree with the view expressed in the court, people start trolling. That is true. But then at times there is a section of society which is kind of cynical to everything, whether this is my way or highway. I'm not talking about that. if you look at it from rational perspective, there are situations, after all, why do Supreme Court judges also give a split verdict? There is also a difference of opinion, and therefore people react in the manner and fashion which they want to. But yes, there is an increasing tendency, if the judgment is not in my, not as per my thoughts, or as per the plea I or my support group presented, then you take to recourse of criticism. That I think, that aspect, the CJO is referring to that aspect, and that aspect I think needs to be contained, because there is tendency to call names to Supreme Court, there is tendency to call names to the judges. On some occasions, the criticism is fair, but on most occasions, the criticism is kind of sweeping and reeks of bias.
Okay, okay, and this is not a problem which is only limited to the critics of the judges or the judiciary, or critics of various judgment as well, the way they are trolled, but in a larger picture as well. Mr. Prasad, when we're talking about, and taking a quote from what the CGI said in his address, that truth is now a victim of false news, fake news or false news, whatever you want to call it, but that's a big menace now. What we're trying to understand, and as Sanjay ji was also pointing out, it was not the same around, say, a decade or a decade and a half ago, when the social media platforms were not there, or they were not that popular. But now everybody has the power to, express their views, and that power is sometimes abused.
Well, precisely that is one reason why we are seeing this challenge emerging in a society, not just in India, but all over across the globe. The fact is, people have a gadget in their hand which they can use to express an opinion or a view based on what they read, perceive, or what they get. For instance, just to carry the conversation forward, a judgment comes out. There is a verdict. If it's a split verdict, then there's suddenly, without having gone into the details of the judgment, in many cases, probably people would react. I'm just second guessing. So what happens then? And suddenly you have a whole new bunch of conversation taking place. Whereas earlier,
entirely new set of thoughts.
Yeah,
the train of thoughts, which is now
train of thoughts, which may or not be based or entirely on having the reading of that judgment, the operative portion of the judgment, and probably understanding the reasoning that judges come to. Every judge gives a reasoning as to why a particular judgment has been derived, and there's a whole history to it. It's a pretty elaborate procedure. That is one thing. Earlier, what used to happen, when people didn't have access to it, we had traditional media, for instance, or television or radio. People who with some kind of understanding experience would go through it, any particular set, I'm not talking of judgment, any particular situation, would study it, analyze it, and then arrive at what is said to be said out of it, distill it, right? That distilled version is then vetted. There is an intermediate supervisory role which somebody looks at it from a fresh pair of mind and a fresh set of eyes, and analyzes it and arrives at this conclusion is probably correct, incorrect, or appropriate, inappropriate, whatever. And then the conversation rolls on. Now all that has vanished. Now immediately at the switch of a button, you get a news, you start reacting. What used to probably, it's what I say in probably in a different context, in a social media has probably externalized what used to be a drawing room conversation.
Okay.
Externalized what used to be a cafeteria conversation. Externalized a thought between two friends, which has now starts magnifying and gathers a steam of its own.
Indeed, indeed. All the drawing room conversation, cafeteria conversation, everything is now on social media, on all these platforms, exchanging views at the drop of a hat. The most important and the most significant part is that, views based on unverified facts or half-baked truths, that is something which is a cause of a problem here.
Again, every citizen is responsible. For instance, we notice, and I speak to many institutions, especially of journalism, I always tell this, as per Constitution, every citizen has the same right as freedom of speech. Journalists don't have a special right. Fair enough. So every citizen is as responsible. So what do we see very common? Forwarded as received. Meaning what? You don't take responsibility. Is that the way? No. I think every citizen is responsible in forwarding anything. It's received on an instrument, which of course we can come to it later.
Okay. We'll come to that part, but let me first bring in Khushbu here as well. Khushbu, as you heard both the gentlemen here, the checks and balances part, that's becoming really important, really significant in today's age, the era of social media platforms, digital technology, and this technology is growing by leaps and bounds as well. we have had these discussions earlier also, how we need to keep track of what is happening on the technology front, make our laws and regulations, in the same way, adaptable to that particular development. Where do we stand now in terms of tackling the menace of fake news or false news legally, and are these laws which we have or regulations which we have right now, enough for us to tackle these challenges?
See, with every technology, there has always been a period of learning, and old laws or archaic laws need to be updated for the present times. If you look at, I think both the panelists with me would agree, the invention of printing press, radio, television, all had a similar learning periods with where society updated its norms, regulations, laws to the limit of bad behavior that was enforcing with the good of these technologies coming in our day-to-day life. Now with social media, we are currently in this learning phase today. Now new technologies certainly bring in a lot of aspect where our ease of life is there, but that also brings a lot of uncertainty, and that is not immediately clear when those technologies come, that how our laws, the existing laws, can address those issues and how they need to be updated. So I think that's the situation which we were facing, and not just us, but I think countries across globe were facing the similar issues, and every country is trying to grapple with this menace of fake news, misinformation, disinformation, which is spreading over social media platforms. And social media platforms have become one of the, though they are not the news channels or the authentic news publications, but still I think half the population that is there on social media are coming on social media for watching news and for getting information around the world with respect to news. So now coming back to your direct question, that are our current laws matching to the standard? See, we do have laws, but we don't have direct dedicated law that deals with the fake information, and that has been talked by our government, and that has been discussed by the Supreme Court of India time and again whenever such issue comes in. And I would say tackling of fake news is not an easy task for any government regulators, because if you'll see, the policymakers around the world are searching new ways to deal with information. Bringing law is not enough, but enforcement of that law is also something which has to be looked into, especially when I talk about misinformation, fake news. There is an aspect of free speech, and what is the thin line between which is the fake news and which is not the fake news. So governments are grappling with it, and government has come up with regulation. The new IT rules of 2021, which was been introduced by the Government of India, specifically talks about building obligations on intermediary to ensure that users do not host, upload, modify, publish any kind of information that tries to mislead or deceive the addressee about the messages, or spread misinformation or disinformation using the social media platform. Apart from that, you do have basic laws which do cover about spreading of fake news, which are punishable offenses, or there are cases where you can go for defamation and other things. But I think it has become a larger issue where even if it's not a defamation, a fake news has a potential of impacting public at large, which might not come into an aspect of defamation. Hence, the government is coming up with a law. They also came up, I think your introduction was the one which was talking about that PIB is now being asked to do the fact checking continuously, so that they can ask the platforms that this is something which has been checked by PIB and it's a false news. Hence, this should not be available in the Indian jurisdiction.
Okay. Sanjay ji, institutional mechanism when we're talking about, like the one, the fact check unit which the PIB has put in place, then the IT rules amendment vis-a-vis the digital media platforms, as well as Khushbu is also saying the laws will take time, the regulations will take time to evolve with the new technology which is there, and the same has been in the past also. But in the meantime, what is it that needs to be done?
Vishal, technology is changing or changes very fast. It takes time to make a law and put procedures in place. Fact remains from what Khushbu Jan was saying, that we have now have IT laws, and also subsequently, as you were referring, we have norms for digital media and also for YouTubes. If you broadly categorize that under digital platforms and YouTube under one umbrella, and also for the intermediaries. Post coming of that regulation, things have changed a bit to a great extent, I would say, because now the government has power to say that, to tell the intermediaries that these are wrong and under XYZ categories, therefore these has to be taken off, and they have also become conscious of certain facts and become alive to the new regulations. If you remember, over 100 or over 300-400 YouTube sites have been deleted, have been taken off. Most of them were originating from outside of territory of India, mostly from our neighboring countries and some other places. They were not, even now, as we speak, there are hundreds of things on social media which are blatantly and patently false, which has nothing to do with facts. You talked about half-baked truth. Half-baked truth is kind of dangerous, but even more dangerous is complete and blatant lies. And you you have technology and tools whereby you can Photoshop something and say something else, and that creates a situation whereby it becomes very difficult for the authorities to meet those challenges. You also had 66A for some time, which was taken off after Supreme Court's intervention, and it was proved that this is much abused law, had become a much abused law of the land. Now we are in a situation whereby people are becoming slightly conscious. Institutional mechanism has been put in place, and therefore, as Prasada was saying, forwarded as received, that tendency also is coming down a bit.
Okay.
Because there was a tendency to forward it as received, to send that as particular thing. But when the new set of regulations came in, some crackdown also happened. I would not say that the present norms are foolproof, but yes, there is a conscious effort in that direction. We are discussing that on various forums, and some kind of consciousness is creeping into popular mind.
Indeed, this discussion also, and discussions many like this, is also an attempt towards that only, to try and find as to what can be done in a better way, and not only from the government's point of view or the platform's point of view, but from the individual's point of view as well. That brings me to another aspect, Ms. Prasad, since you referred to it earlier, as well. The tendency of, forwarding messages or forwarding, information without verifying that. That's one. The second part is self-regulatory mechanism. For example, you've been a part of the print media for a long time. You understand the laws which were in place, the rules which were in place for self-regulation of print media. Similarly, Sanjay ji has been part of both print and television and now digital as well. So when we talk about self-regulation, how do both of you look? Let's start with Prasad from here.
Self-regulation was also because we had institutional setups. We worked in formal structures where we had, as I told you, layers where you could sift stuff. And by the time the gatekeeper opened the gate for the news to flow into the public realm, there were certain standards set on the way when we actually would go into it. So there were multi-layered systems, whether it was television, whether it was news, radio, or print media. This is a very well established system. Because at the end of the day, you're in a newspaper industry, every morning or whatever periodicity or publication is coming out, you are publishing in black and white. So there is no shades of gray there, right? We are there out in the public domain every morning, and if there is anything wrong, we can straight away be acted against. In what form and fashion is what I'm not getting into. What I'm saying is, but we are responsible for everything we write. So that sense of, whereas you mentioned, and I think Sanjay also mentioned, the fact is now we have access to technology where every individual is free to air an opinion or react to a situation the way they are reacting. That is what is leading to the situation where unverified, less verified, or the tendency to believe what comes to you on a platform from a reliable source, as you would believe, a classmate or a friend or a colleague whom you trust, sends you, hey, I found this interesting, would you like to watch? And you find it mind-blowing, and you say, okay, let me send it across now. You're actually doing the chain processes without even getting into the checks and balances. So that's what happens every time.
Okay.
And I think that is a challenge that will continue till we find, as one, raise the level of consciousness, tell people that what we are doing is this, let's all work collectively together. I think the fact checking is as much societal issue. I mean, government comes from the people, right? but government have only a limited area to work on, because excess government is also people will resent. End of the day, we'll have to find a balance.
Okay. Finding a balance, and that means the industry itself, those professionals like you, Mr. Prasad, and myself, we will also have to be very conscious of the fact that yes, there is a responsibility.
Vishal, again, there are two sides. I remember when I was a young reporter and I'd done some report, and there was some letter came to my office saying that this he was angry or whatever, and he said he's referring that to Press Council of India. So the matter reached to my editor, then editor, and I was asked for an interview with my editor, given a chance to meet him. And he said, "Kya hai?" I said, "What is your story?" I explained him my story. I said, "There is this Press Council of India." He says, "Has notice come from Press Council of India?" I said, "Yes." "Throw that in dustbin. Kuch nahi hai. Bhul jao. Your story was good. It was a good story. Bhul jao." So even if Press Council of India has been mandated by a law, and some justice presides over Press Council of India, look at the kind of influence or the authority Press Council of India had. He was very well respected editor. I would not name him. You also had a body which used to take care of broadcast news, which is television, TV news, and TV had all kinds of news all the time. What was limited in few hands has gone to masses, which I say this is empowerment. There is also a situation whereby if 5 media outlets previously decided to block a news, even today, to access some news which is actually happening on the ground, you get that from social media. Again, therefore, ridiculing social media per se, I think that we also need to be slightly
That's not the solution.
of that part, because you get to know a whole lot of the things which you don't get in traditional media, because a whole lot of interest and otherwise things, and it is the social media. But then again, the kind of fake news menace and the tendency of people with motivated interest, that has to be contained.
Okay. Khushbu, the gist of it all, and we would like to understand from you as well, from a legal perspective also. Of course, the regulatory mechanisms, the laws which are in place, or the self-regulatory mechanism which we're talking about, different subcategories of this industry, be it print, television, or now digital, publishing, will continue to evolve with time. But the bigger question, as both the panelists are also pointing out, and you also refer to it, is vis-a-vis the individuals, citizens like yourself and myself, as our responsibility. How do we go about that, and what does the law say on that?
See, for individuals like you and me, we need to understand, let's not be part of the age of infodemic. We all are, that fear of missing out, the information we get, we just want to instantly forward or, be the first one to do that. Let's understand that not every news that we see on internet had to be relied upon. You have to fact check it. There are resources where you can check it. Apart from that, if it's an government letter or an official letter, might go to the original website and check it once, or rely on the authentic channels it is coming on from. Anybody who is close to you sending you the message doesn't mean that it is true, because that person must have relied on something else. So before spreading something which can have an impact, on society, which can create a law and order situation, which can emotionally or otherwise hurt somebody's sentiments, best is to check before sending it. Don't get into the age of FOMO, that is fear of missing out. Apart from that, I think we need to have regulation which is slightly strict. I understand that there has to be a fine balance, but a regulation which also imposes penalties, fines on individuals or corporates who are spreading such kind of news which can create an havoc in the society. Apart from that, I think we need a dedicated regulation that seek to thwart any kind of fake news or false news. And for that, I think it's not just understanding what fake news is, but we need to have options, something which Singapore did. If I may just take 2 minutes to talk about, that is, they talked about something called as correction direction. Now, if I say about what is correction direction, that requires the party who communicated the false news to put up a notice stating that the previous news which I have stated is something which is false, and this is the correction which is there. One. Second, you need to have another option, that is stop communication direction. That is, you give a direction to the person who has spread the fake news to take necessary steps to ensure that false communication is no longer available on or through the internet to the end users of India. Now, apart from that, there should be something called as targeted correction direction. Now, these news are practically not just given to personally from me to you, but it's spread on internet or intermediaries which are there. So, with this targeted correction direction, what Government of India can do, it is the internet intermediaries whose services are being taken as a means for spreading this false communication in India will be required to communicate a correction notice to all the end users who have accessed that false news. That service should be given to those people so that they understand that has been done. So I think these are the few measures which need to be taken as a part of a regulation so that internet becomes a healthy space for all of us and this industry can flourish. I think, as rightly said by my earlier panelist, that we cannot close eyes to social media or say that, ban social media, because that become the part and parcel of our life. As I said, that people go to these platforms for reading news, despite knowing that there can be the authenticity is not 100% over there, but despite that there is a flood of users over these platforms. So I think what we have to understand is how to bring in that balance, and this place becomes a place of not a fake news medium.
Okay, indeed, that is required, and those suggestions coming in there. Thank you so much, Khushbu, there for your views, and Sanjay ji and Mr. Prasad as well for sharing your valuable inputs here. As our experts were pointing out, clearly various aspects of the menace of fake news or false news or propaganda, which is put on the social media platforms there or disseminated through other means as well, and the ways to tackle that. Of course, all stakeholders, be it the publishers and the individuals or the industry itself, all are equally responsible and will have to take that responsibility and move forward, in addition to, of course, evolving laws and regulatory mechanisms also. We'll keep a close watch here and come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sunset Television. Thank you.